Even under normal circumstances, people ask me how to make bread. Now we're in a global pandemic and people are panic buying flour without even knowing what to do with it. I'm going to show you how to make this simple loaf of bread on today's debut and final episode of Pedro's COVID Kitchen. Okay, people think making bread is intimidating, and it can be if you want it to be, but I'm a Luddite and I'm going to show you how to make a really simple bread for maximum Instagram likes. And if you want to get deep in your bread, I recommend Ken Forkish flour, water, salt, yeast. You can go as deep as you want to go. That's not what we're doing today. We're doing a really simple bread. So I'm going to start out by showing you what gear you need. All right, most of this you should have, and if you don't, you can improvise on anything. Rubber spatula, wooden spoon. This is called a bread lame, and it's just a razor blade. So hopefully you have a razor blade, X-Acto knife, sharp blade of some kind. Bowl, you're going to need a few bowls. Hopefully you have bowls. The pros call this a bench scraper, but it's just for cleaning up. So you use virtually anything, spatula, whatever. Measuring cups, measuring spoons, and then this is a specialty item called a proofing bowl, but that you don't have to have. You can just use regular bowl with a cloth in it. All right. This is probably the most essential item. This is called a Dutch oven. You're going to bake your bread in the Dutch oven inside your regular oven. This is just a plastic bag. That's parchment paper. And this is a piece of cloth. All right, that's pretty much everything you're going to need. Now let's move on to ingredients. Here we have your ingredients. Cool thing about bread, super simple ingredients. All-purpose flour. It's a little more flour for later on. This is active dry yeast, just your basic yeast that you can get in a grocery store in the little envelopes. Kosher salt. And then this is really fine New York reservoir water. We'll have a link in the comments where you can order some of this fine water from us. But any water will do. Okay, we have our ingredients. We are ready to set up our bread. I call it setting up bread. No one else calls it that. But dude, I'm going to set up some bread. We've got our flour, we got our yeast, we got our salt and water. We're going to mix them up. If I were a pro, I would be weighing all my ingredients because it's a little more precise. I'm not a pro. This is 3 cups of flour. Goes into my bowl. 1 teaspoon of salt. Half teaspoon of yeast. I like to mix the dry ingredients first just to make sure the yeast and the salt get mixed into all the flour. Okay, I'm going to add my water to my dry ingredients. I'm going to reserve a little bit of water. What I'm going for is a shaggy dough. And if I've already achieved it, I don't want to make it too wet. If I haven't achieved it yet, I got a little more water to put in. This is 1.5 cups of water. I'm going to start out with roughly a cup. So I'm pouring it right in the middle. And then mixing it up. A lot of the water is absorbed. If you look at this, you can see there's still a lot of dried flour in there. That is not enough water, so I'm going to pour more water into my bread dough. calling that a shaggy dough. And I still have maybe a quarter cup of water left. There you have it. All we do now is put this into a plastic bag, seal it, and then we leave it overnight. It'll be ready to go in the morning. I've let it go as short as 8 hours. I think I've let it go as long as 15 to 20 hours. No matter what, you're going to end up with bread. Next step, we got to proof it. Okay, we've let this sit overnight. Let's take a look at what our bread dough is looking like. Starting to bubble, starting to become a big, goopy, nasty mess. Perfect. What is going on there is something, it's fermentation. It's something about the alcohol and bacteria development. I don't really understand it. All I know is that the gluten is setting up in the flour. The yeast is consuming something and it's farting out gas. And because of the gluten, it's containing those gas bubbles so that when we make a loaf of bread, it'll be airy and not super dense. Preheat our oven to 450 degrees. And it's super important to have our Dutch oven in the oven while it's preheating because we want this super hot. So, oven's preheating. First thing we want to do is fold the dough. So, flour our work surface. I use a rubber spatula to get the dough out because at this point it's glutinous. Any extra dough left in your bowl is going to be hard to clean. So boom, there's the monster. Little flour on my hands. Alright, all I'm doing is grabbing the dough, stretching it out, folding it back over itself. Turn it a little bit, grab the dough, stretch it out, fold it over itself. Grab the dough, stretch it out, fold it over itself, and keep doing that. Eventually, when you do that, it won't want to stretch out as far. It's already starting to do it. I usually only get about 8 of these in before it's done. And you don't want to tear the dough. That's super important. Don't pull it until it tears. Just pull it until it stretches. All right. Now the only problem is we have all these seams on it. So what I do, I don't know how many of the pros do this, but I was in a pizzeria early in the morning in Florence, Italy, and I was watching the pizza guys prepare their pizza dough. And so that's where I got this technique, but I call it tucking the dough. And it's the point is to kind of get rid of these seams and to stretch out the surface. So on a non-floured part of your work surface, grab it and just pull it to you. And you're pulling from the bottom. So pull it to yourself, turn it, pull it to yourself, and it's on a non-floured surface so that it kind of grips the surface a little bit. You might see that the tension of the skin is starting to get nice and tight. I tend to overdo this because I just like this step and because I'm compulsive. That's what I'm hoping for right there. Seams are kind of disappearing and skin tension is good. All right, so now we put this into our proofing basket. If you don't have a proofing basket, just take any bowl that's big enough. Take a towel. Put a little bit of flour in the towel. put the bread in there, put a towel over it. That's the way to do it if you don't have a proofing basket. But I have a proofing basket. I'm going to throw a little bit of flour in there. This is important for a bowl or a proofing basket. You want to put it this side down so that when you dump it out, those seams will be on the bottom of the bread. So even if they aren't the prettiest seams, you don't see them. And we just cover it with a cloth and let it sit. Again, I don't know exactly what's happening when it's proofing, but I do know it takes 15 to 45 minutes depending on variables like temperature, humidity, how wet your dough is. So what I'm going to do is test it for readiness using a method that comes from that Ken Forkish book I mentioned earlier. So we'll take a look. Let's test to see if it's ready to go. Stick your finger halfway into the bread. When you pull it out, it should spring back really slowly and incompletely. If it springs right back, it's underproofed. If it doesn't spring back, it's overproofed. Our bread is proofed. It's time to throw it in the Dutch oven. A couple important things to know. Number one, Dutch oven has got to be hot. So it's been preheating. We should be good there. Number two, you want something so that the dough doesn't stick to the bottom of the Dutch oven. For the longest time, I would just throw some flour in there. You could use cornmeal. More recently, I started to use parchment. You want it to be the shape of the bottom of your pot. I've recently started the innovation of creating these handles because when you pop your dough into the Dutch oven, typically what you do is just flip your bowl and let it plop in there. And when it does that, sometimes it hits the side, sometimes it gets a little wonky. So what I've started doing is plopping my dough onto the parchment so that I can just lift that into my Dutch oven. This is where your razor blade is of use. This is ready to go. You just throw it right in your Dutch oven. The thing is, when you do that, the steam will make it crack open in different places. Looks beautiful. It's like kind of that rustic bread look. If you want to control how it opens up, take a razor blade and slice it. So I'm just going to do something simple. I'm just going to slice across right into the top. And that way, when my bread bakes, it's going to open up right along those scores. I'm going to grab the Dutch oven and I'm going to put it in there. Close the oven so you don't let heat out. This is why those handles are useful. Boom, ready to go. You want to do this pretty quickly because you don't want to lose any heat. Okay, that should bake for about 30 minutes. Then we're going to take the top off of it and bake it another 15-20 minutes. The key to the top, the reason we have that top on there is the steam comes out of the bread, but the lid contains all that steam. If you don't have a Dutch oven, you're going to have to improvise. Maybe an iron skillet with a heat-safe bowl on top of it. Maybe you've got a big cooking pot that has a lid. You could try that. Another thing I've heard of doing, I've never done it, is putting a bowl of boiling water in the oven with your bread uncovered, and that steam creates a steamy environment in the oven. again, you're going to get bread. No matter what, you're going to get bread. So have patience and go for it. It's been 30 minutes. Time to take the top off the Dutch oven, and I'll show you what it looks like. Ooh, it's hot. Ooh, it's hot. It's hot. It's hot. Oh yeah, that's what I'm calling bread. This is definitely not done, but doing what we want it to do. So it'll go back in for another 15-20 minutes. These are called ears. You want to get those just barely not burnt. That's when you know it's done. All right, this is going back in the oven 15-20 minutes.
Give me that bread.
20 minutes have passed. Kitchen smells amazing. Pretty sure the bread is done. We're going to take a look. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. We got bread. It is nice and brown. Little almost blackened on the tips of those ears, which is a good sign. If I was a pro, I would check the temperature. It needs to be 190 degrees internally. I almost never do that. Basically, if it looks like bread, it's pretty much done. Let's see if I can get it out of here without burning my hands. Boom. Woo. Woo. Hot. All right. There we have it. Again, this is how I make bread. It's not how bread is made. I just recommend you experiment. Try different flours, try different time, different amount of water. You know, even if you mess it up, it's going to taste like bread. It's going to be good with butter and salt and all that. So there you have it. Thanks for joining me on Pedro's COVID Kitchen, and don't touch your face.